left, or relatives.
This is the Social Factor.
I think we're on.
We are on.
Hello! Another episode of Russia and the Social Factor.
Yes.
Yes, welcome back to the Social Factor. We're on part 3 of Russia. First time we've ever had a part 3 episode.
Well, it just seems like our episodes are based on the size of the country itself. Being the largest country in the world.
Yeah.
Last time we basically discussed from the Cold War all the way to let's say 1996, and then of course.
Yeah, we were pretty close to around there.
Yeah, and then of course for some odd reason it discussed admitted to the G7 group of industrialized countries suspended in March of 2014. So somehow they got kicked out.
Yeah.
So that was in 1996 as well. All right. Well, let's just take a moment if you want to do your spiel like you always do.
Yep. So anyway, go ahead and like us on Facebook, facebook.com/socialfactorpodcast. Usually we try to keep these 45 minutes long. That's the longest we'll go with the show is 45 minutes. For this final episode of Russia, no promises on that.
Promises in as far as and the length,
as in making it 45 minutes.
Oh.
Hopefully we can make it 45 minutes.
Hopefully, yeah, because we're down to the end.
But we also don't stretch our information here. I mean,
Yeah.
we talk about what we need to talk about and elaborate when we... Yeah.
And then we throw some jokes in there,
Yeah.
Jokes, extra commentary,
So it's going to be part 3 of Russia, and as David has told me throughout the week, we're going to be starting with the Putin era.
Well, actually, we're finishing up with the Yeltsin era.
Okay.
And then that's sort of, Yeltsin was kind of, he was like the beginning and the end of the transition phase for Russia, when it went from the Soviet Union to Russia itself.
Okay.
And then this man by the name of Vladimir Putin showed up. Now, he's been in the secret world of the Russian government, the KGB, but we'll talk about him once I'm ready to get into that thing. So let's finish talking about the twilight of Yeltsin. We're going to talk about the twilight of Yeltsin and go right into Putin after that. Okay?
Awesome.
Anything else before we begin?
I don't think so, no.
All right. So, we'll call this the Yeltsin Twilight Years. In 1998, September 1998 to be exact, new Prime Minister Evgeny Primakov stabilizes collapsing ruble. It ends danger of debt default and carries out major taxation reform. And again, these are like points where, this is economic issues. They're looking at a crisis now. They're trying to control it. They're losing, or the ruble's being devaluated. So a lot of people in Russia were deathly afraid of this, And at some point, when our U.S. economy in 2008 was kind of facing the same thing, was the mortgage crisis and so on, and people got really scared. Only this is worse because now you have a regime that's already ended, and you're basically, Russia and Yeltsin were like hanging on to a life vest, you know what I'm saying, or one of those, what is it called, the life tube?
Life
preserver, yeah. That's what Russia was at the time. So also opposes NATO, campaign against Yugoslavia, and the reason why the Russians can opposed that time is because Clinton supported the attack on the Serbian people, okay, during the civil war between Croatia, Serbia, and Albania, okay, and I remember very clearly what Clinton did, and Russia said Serbians are like our brothers. They actually share the same culture and the same religion, and it is believed that Serbians came from Russia and settled in the Balkans like that. So, so Russia distanced itself from U.S. foreign policy. Yeltsin eventually falls out with Yevgeny Primakov eventually has a fallout with President Yeltsin, who dismisses him in May of 1999. So, in August of 1999, armed men from Chechnya invaded neighboring Russian territory of Dagestan. Okay, so Chechnya actually is kind of close to Georgia. Okay, but apparently this is a smaller, like, neighboring country. Okay, and it's predominantly Russian ancestry that live there, people that are Russian by nature. So President Yeltsin appoints ex-KGB officer Vladimir Putin. Ding, 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 ding. Here we are. Prime Minister was briefed to bring Chechnya back under control. So Putin had an amazing reputation already then. He was a major in the KGB, okay, which is the elites of these special services and security. We talked about that last time. And Yeltsin looks at him and says, clean Chechnya up, okay? And boy, he sure did. In December of 1999, Yeltsin resigns in favor of Vladimir Putin, okay, who takes over Buryat by popularity over majority military campaign against Chechen rebels. Again, now we got to remember the Chechens are 89 to 90% Muslims. Very small percentage are Jews or Christians. Okay, so it was a predominantly Muslim nation. Okay, also a former Soviet satellite country, and again, now this was a 2-year campaign. Okay, for the Russian government, and we're going to continue with Putin asserts his control. Okay. So by March of 2000, President Putin wins elections. Now, contrary to belief in the United States, because everybody thinks it's like communism never left, there's a lot of communist parties still existing in Russia, but they did have elections. And whether they were pulled off with a little corruption or not, that depends. We really don't know. You could say the same thing about the U.S. elections, okay? Yeah. But ultimately, they were the Russian people wanted someone with power and with understanding of foreign and domestic policies. And Putin actually fit the glove. Yeah. They needed someone strong, okay? Not saying I'm like 100% Putin, but I'm just saying they needed someone strong. So, August of 2000, Mr. Putin, which it should be President Putin, faces criticism over a sinking of Kursk nuclear submarine, given his slow response and official what's it called? Oh, I've never heard that obfuscation. I've never even heard this. This is a weird one. All right, so we're gonna skip that word because I have no idea what it means. But I do remember this incident, and what it was a nuclear sub that went down. Ooh. And Putin, being who he was, his background, this was a nuclear sub, and it was a classified sub. Okay. So he didn't really want to spread the word too much, and they tried. The Russian government tried to deal with it until they ended up getting the U.S. and European countries involved to try to rescue these sailors. And as far as I know, none of them survived. Okay. They had a leak, a radioactive, nuclear radioactive leak. They were at a depth that was just almost impossible to get them out safely. And I know at one point they were starting to break up. Okay. So it was really down there. Mm-hmm. And I think it was I think it was in the Baltic Seas. So really down there. I'm not sure.
Did that radiation leak affect anything down there? Or?
Well, I think it's still at the bottom, unless I heard a rumor that they finally raised it after like 10 years of being down there, but or more. I don't know. I don't want to make that fact. I really don't know. But there was a rumor going around that the Russians finally got down there and took care of it. But I know that the nuclear leak or the radioactive leak was actually contained within the sub.
Okay.
So I think most people died of poisoning. I don't think there was any drowning involved. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. All right. So, see, that's bugging me now. Obfuscation. Never heard. Look that up. O-B-F-U-S.
Google.
O-B-F-U-S.
C-A-T-I-O-N.
Okay, I was like, hold on, the typing is not functioning. Obfuscation.
I've never. I mean, this is unique.
Let's see, what does Google say?
The action of something obscure, unclear, or unintelligible.
Oh.
And that was to the public and the rest of the world.
This is how it's pronounced.
Obfuscation.
Obfuscation. Okay, thank you. Sorry guys, we just needed a clarification on the word. So the obfuscation, we'll call it obfuscation. Of course, most governments are obfuscated, okay, because they have a tendency of not being forthright about any classified information. And based on the location, it was a sensitive area anyway. So it was they made a movie out of it, by the way. So if you ever want to watch it, it's actually a sad movie. All right, and December.
I don't particularly like sad movies.
Well, this was from a military point of view. This is a naval thing, you know.
Yeah.
All right, so December of 2000, Mr. Putin begins steady process of rehabilitating Soviet era by reinstalling 1944 through 1991 anthem with new words.
Oh.
So their national anthem was rewritten, but the same music was behind it.
Okay.
I mean, he was a big time party member, okay, of the Communist Party, and he was one of those people that was actually angry that the era ended.
Okay.
Okay, so understanding that, he wanted to bring some, because the large majority of Russians still were kind of tied to the Communist Party, he wanted that support. So he brought back the sound, just a few different words, and I thought it was a smart thing.
It does seem like a smart move, at least on his part.
Definitely, and I think before we end the show, when we end it, I want you to find the anthem, the old and the new, and we're going to play it for the audience.
Okay.
Okay, because it is actually a very beautiful, beautiful song. Can I translate it? Hell no. But
And I don't know Russian.
you get exactly, but you guys never even heard the Russian anthem,
Right.
have you? See, I heard it a few times in Germany. Okay, so now we're going to May of 2002. Russia and the United States announced a new agreement on strategic nuclear weapon reduction. Okay, so we're back at that. You know, we're trying to reduce all these different, because the arsenal that both countries had could destroy us. They say 40 times over. Okay. So in the meantime, you have these little countries that want to build it, like Iran and Korea, North Korea, Do you know that Israel actually has, I think from what the last one I heard was about 15 to 20 years ago, Israel actually has 160 warheads.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think they needed to keep all the Arab nations away. All right.
I agree.
All right, so, and on top of that, Russian and NATO foreign ministers set up NATO-Russian Council with equal role in decision-making on terrorism and other security threats. Russia was dealing with a lot of Islamic fundamentalism, and people were dying there, like, weekly, okay? Even before we got hit, okay? So they wanted to share information. They wanted to share what kind of groups they were dealing with, what capabilities of these groups were, and whether. And then, you're also dealing with it's called the lone wolf effect. Okay, so this person might belong to this organization, but he gets information and then he takes it from there. A lone wolf. So now you have this one guy, and there's no trace to what organization he belongs to, and that became very prominent in Russia and throughout Europe and the Middle East. So it became a big thing. I mean, our enemies became very smart. Okay. All right, let's go. Okay, October of 2002, Chechen rebels seize a Moscow theater. Now that was a horrible nightmare, and held about 800 people hostage. Most of the rebels and around 120 hostages are killed when Russian forces storm the building. They killed and here's the thing. In this one, a word came out. A very famous word called the Black Widows. You ever heard that?
Mm-mm.
Women who were part of this terrorist Chechen organization whose husband died fighting the Russians.
Oh.
They were known as the Black Widows. And I remember that because I ended up finding out about that, not only by the media, but by this point I'm already working for the TSA.
Okay.
So we were actually made aware that, you know, this is this new group, Chechen. For us it was new, for the Russians it wasn't, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But these women would strap explosives on them, or they would start shooting you with AK-47s. And, I mean, and these were hurt women, women that wanted revenge, okay? And they were trained, and their name was given the Black Widows.
Okay.
So you guys didn't know that, did you?
No.
Yeah.
I've always associated it more with what I thought as like women who killed their husbands as being Black Widows.
Correct. In this case, it's just the reverse, because they're avenging their lovers
their
and
husbands.
husbands, or their fathers, or their brothers, okay? It wasn't only about the husband, but often any male figure in their life that they loved.
Okay.
So, alright. So, let's go to June of 2003. Government access last remaining nationwide independent TV channel, TVS, citing financial reasons. I'm sorry. So basically, and this is TVS. I'm assuming was a Russian mainstream channel, and apparently they financially couldn't handle it. So, all right. Oh, this here's one of the countries with the stand at the end. So in September of 2003, Kyrgyzstan. Oh, I got it good. Grants Russia first military base abroad in 13 years to counter Islamic terrorism. So it's already starting. You know, this is already almost 2 years after 9/11. In fact, this was exactly 2 years after 9/11. And so Russia, in a way, was helping us. But I mean, we got intel like crazy from Russia. Okay, and
I believe
we're sharing with the Russians, the Israelis, the French, the Germans, you name it. But for Russia to be that involved was a good sign for them in the long run. October of 2003, Yukos oil boss and prominent liberal Mikhail, Khodorkovsky, okay. I hope you people understand that because I'm having a hard time here. Arrested on charges of tax evasion and fraud, an early casualty of President Putin's campaign to drive Yeltsin-era oligarchs out of politics. In 2005, he is sentenced to 9 years imprisonment and is pardoned and goes to exile in 2013. So, a little bit of corruption on Putin's side.
Yeah.
All right. So this timeline, these are good highlights, very important highlights involving the different aspects of the Russian government from the time they were created to now. And it's interesting because most of us have no reason to know these people,
Right.
okay? Unless you read the New York Post or something like that, or the Wall Street Journal or something like that. All right. So in December, hang on. President Putin's United Russia wins landslide Duma election victory. I keep on saying this word, Buoyed. Look this up real quick. B-U-O-Y-E-D. B-U-O-Y-E-D. I don't know how to say it.
Buoyed?
Like buoyed? Buoyed?
Yeah. Past tense buoyed, to keep someone or something afloat.
Oh, so it's like a buoy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
Buoyed.
So buoyed by economic recovery. So apparently, he wins in a landslide and is able to maintain the economy. military stance, and so on and so forth. Thank you for looking that up. All right. Then we get to 2004, and the title is Squeeze on Oligarchs. March of 2004. Mr. Putin wins second presidential term by landslide, consolidating his power. By August of 2004, authorities seize Lugansk, Russian names, damn it. Yugoslav-Tegas, or Yukos key production unit over alleged tax debt. So it sounds like the Russian government is collecting money.
Okay.
So the tax debt in move widely seen as punishment for Yukos boss Khodorkovsky's opposition to Putin. So state formally says Yugansk-Tegas in December. So not okay. So the belief is that this guy who ran this company by the name of Yukos was anti-Putin, and so they not only do they seize his company, but he has to pay all this tax back.
Okay.
And pretty much destroy his business.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a Putin thing. All right. In September of 2004, more than 380 people, many of them children, killed when mainly Chechen and Ingush Islamists besieged a school in North Ossetia, Beslan. Prompts boost in state security despite widespread public criticism of handling a siege. So the Chechens decide to go to a school with children. It sounds to me it was not like high school, it was even younger. And 380 people died.
Wow.
Mainly children. That tells you they're willing to do anything. You know? Mr. Putin scraps direct election of regional governors who will henceforth be government appointees. Interesting. Now, usually, like in America, a governor is appointed by election.
Mm-hmm.
But according to this, Putin now selected them.
And he made it so he would continue to select them.
So they're under his guise.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely a power thing going here.
Definitely.
In February of 2005, Moscow and Tehran, which is in Iran, that's the capital, signed an agreement by which Russia will supply fuel for Iran's Bushehr nuclear reactor, and Iran will send spent fuel rods back to Russia. And I have a beef with that one.
Okay.
Because this alliance is not good for the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism,
Okay.
including Chechnya. Alright, and Putin has been dealing with, Russia has been dealing with this Chechen uprising and this terrorist act, and yet he's dealing with one of the head of the people, or the head country of all terrorism around the world. So
And he's supplying
plus
them fuel.
uranium and all this other stuff, or radioactive material. So no, that's not good. And in that sense, I really look down on Putin for that, because why not deal with another country that's not that much of a threat? And of course, it didn't help during the Obama administration, because they were giving him $400 million, $1.4 billion to do this exchange, But we'll get to that later.
Oh,
All right. March of 2005, Chechen separatist leader Aslan Maskadov killed by Russian forces. 2005, June, state gains control of Gazprom gas giant by increasing its stakes in the company to over 50%. So that's what you call a corporate takeover.
Yeah.
So there's a pattern here. Alright, September of 2005, Russia and Germany signed major deal to build Nord Stream gas pipeline under Baltic Sea between the two countries. And it came online in 2011. And it's being used now. Russia now is one of the biggest fuel supplier in all of Eastern and Western Europe, including England. So they become pretty powerful that way.
Yeah.
Alright, so 2006, January of it, Putin signs law giving authorities extensive new powers to monitor the activity of non-governmental organizations and suspend them if they are found to pose an alleged threat to national security. So pretty much the person being wiretapped to has no idea. Okay? Alright, July 2006, Russia's most wanted man, Chechen warlord Shamil Basayev, killed by security forces.
Okay.
November of 2006, former Russian security service officer Alexander Litvinenko, here we go, Litvinenko, an outspoken critic of the Kremlin living in exile in London, dies of, I remember this guy, polonium poisoning.
Oh.
Britain accuses Russian former security officer of murder. And let me get into detail about this. I remember reading this story. They're saying that someone on the street as he was walking had a syringe. And it was done so quickly, it was right through his coat, into his shirt, into the skin.
Wow.
He ended up losing his hair, losing his, just his fingers were turning colors, and he ended up being admitted into the ICU in, I think, London or someplace. And mind you, he was in exile, meaning he was in England at the time, and he died. I don't even remember how long it took him. I think it took him 15 days to die, but.
Wow. That's kind
And
of
they looked at him like,
death.
this is like radioactive poisoning, and they're like, what the hell? So I think that's not, but the MI5 or MI6, I forget who they are, got involved, and of course, what's that other one? Interpol
Okay.
also got involved during the investigation, and and so the conclusion came that it was probably another agent of the Russian government that took care of this. And he didn't like Putin, this guy, so. And Putin has a very raw reputation. He's someone you don't want to cross. Alright, so, how are we getting there? March of 2007, dozens detained as a riot breaks up St. Petersburg protests by demonstrators accusing President Putin of stifling democracy.
Oh.
Yeah, so pro-democracy people. I don't think they've ever lived in the U.S. Alright. Now, the next stage is called Row with Britain. Okay. So, July 2007, diplomatic row between London and Moscow over Britain's bid for the extradition of Andrei Lugovoy, an ex-KGB agent accused of the one that died, Mr. Litvinenko's murder, and it's starting to cause tension between England and Russia because they want this guy. He's, bring him back. So in August of 2007, Russia mounts an Arctic expedition apparently aimed at expanding its territorial claims. I remember this, and plant a flag on the seabed of the North Pole.
Really?
Yeah, that's never been done before. I think one time, but I think it was England that did it once. Either that or the United States, I don't remember. But they claimed the North Pole. Arrogant Russians. No offense to any Russians. November 2007, President Putin signs law suspending Russia's participation in the 1990 National Armed Forces in Europe Treaty that limits the deployment of heavy military equipment across Europe.
Oh.
So, he didn't like that.
Okay.
I guess he wanted to show his power and his might, and they say, no. So he goes, screw you. So, I'm sorry, what? So, in November of 2007, December of 2007, President Putin United Russia Party wins landslide in a parliament election, which critics describe as neither free nor democratic.
Well, by this point, do you expect it to be either? I mean, it's kind of progressed in a way.
It's becoming a police state. It's
Yeah.
becoming a police state.
It's definitely progressed away from what we consider democracy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, their living conditions have improved since Putin took over.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. Russia was in a bad place. But the thing is, this man was the old war. He's old school.
I think
He's trying to recapture the communist movement.
He's leaning more towards the communist side of everything.
Oh, he was an expert at it.
Uh-huh.
So in 2008, January of 2008, Russia revived Soviet-era Atlantic Navy exercises in neutral waters in the Bay of Biscay off of France in demonstrations of resurgent military muscle. I can only imagine the French were ready to give up. Surrender! No, I'm kidding. They did in so many different times. Alright, I'm sorry, that was a jab at the French. So then we
they
go...
have a reputation.
They do. I'll tell you a joke before we end, because I want everybody to hear this. Alright, so in March of 2008, Putin allied Dmitry Medvedev, which I know him, he became a minister, wins presidential elections as Mr. Putin cannot serve a third consecutive term, later appoints Mr. Putin prime minister. So he became president and Putin became prime minister. Because I guess there's two different seats in Russia. Okay?
Right, we have talked about the two different
Yeah,
seats
the
a little
Duma
bit.
and then you have the prime minister. Yep. Alright, so now, I don't know, do you guys remember Georgia and the 2-year fighting there and stuff? Yeah, okay, let's talk about this, because in August of 2008, tensions with Georgia escalate into war after Georgian troops attack Russian-backed separatist forces in South Ossetia.
Are we talking about the state Georgia?
No, as in the country. Georgia in like a satellite country next to Russia. Not the state Georgia.
Well, there's a country called Georgia next to Russia?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes. We're not talking about, Atlanta, Georgia here. All right. I love American education. But that's fine.
dear.
Okay, so in Georgia, which is what they call a client state of the former Soviet Union, okay? Russia drives Georgian forces from South Ossetia and Abkhazia, then recognizes both as independent states. So the Russians throw them out, and then they realize, okay, now you can have this property. And it wasn't like an overnighter thing. It was like a.
Oh, jeez.
It was a little while. In November of 2008, Parliament votes overwhelmingly in favor of a bill that would extend the next president's term of office from 4 to 6 years. Putin, you're a smart genius. Because you cannot have 3 consecutive terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you sit one out, just like Obama wants to do now, okay, and you come back, now it went from 4 to 6 years. So you just like almost
now
doubled
you can
your
have
time.
Another 6 years.
Now you can have another 12 years if you consecutively win. So yeah, it's amazing, and this is Parliament, the Duma, You know what I mean?
But no, that was Prime Minister. Never mind.
Well, he remember he was assigned or given Prime Minister while President Vesdet took the. I mean, this guy appointed Putin as Prime Minister, and he was one of his juniors. Putin was his superior at one point, because I remember reading about that. All right, So, January of 2009, Russia stops gas supplies to Ukraine. I remember this very well. After the collapse of talks to resolve a roll over unpaid bills, supplies to southeastern Europe are disrupted for several weeks as the result of the dispute. Now, I know this personally because I was talking to a family in Germany, and it was affecting them as well.
Okay.
I mean, like gas lines and stuff were getting much larger than usual. And in April of 2009, Russia formally ends operations against rebels in Chechnya. I take it back. It was Chechnya that was several years. I think only a few months in Georgia. Okay. So I stand corrected. Although sporadic violence continues, including people blowing themselves up to kill a few people. All right. The thaw was the U.S. All right. So in July of, I always want to say 19, but it's not, 2009, President Medvedev and Barack Obama, on his first official visit to Moscow, reached an outlined agreement to reduce nuclear weapon stockpiles and aimed to replacing the 1991 START 1 treaty. That was the name, START 1 treaty. So Obama did his bit, and in September of 2009, how are we doing on time?
Got 8 minutes left.
Okay, September of 2009, Russia welcomes the U.S. decision to shelve missile defense bases in Poland and the Czech Republic. All right, October of 2009, opposition parties accused the authorities of rigging local election as the governing United Russian Party wins every poll by a wide margin. So now, it's a Hillary Clinton thing, okay? In 2010, April of it, President Medvedev signs a new strategic arms agreement with the United States, committing both sides to cut arsenals of deployment nuclear warheads by about 30%, which is pretty big. And then we have in June of 2010, President Medvedev and Obama mark warming in ties of the Russian leaders' first visit to the White House, and that's never happened before. That was the first time ever. Obama says the U.S. will back Russia's World Trade Organization accession, and Russia will allow the U.S. to resume poultry export. So they allow us to ship out chicken, and the way I understand it is we'll give them access to the World Trade Organization.
Oh.
We're going to give them money, and we get chicken. Okay. All right.
I think we're selling
Does that sound
chicken,
funny?
though. Yeah.
I mean,
it sounds strange.
Here's the WTO. It's all yours. We're going to get you in there. You can now make a lot of money if you want. Putin's like, yeah, you dumb idiots, yeah.
Yeah.
But let us export chicken to your country. I would say, never mind. I'm going to continue. All right. So July of 2010.
Maybe their chicken's so much better.
Apparently. Well, we got all the hormones,
Yeah.
And the chicken we had today was like big. Carol was shocked. All right. A customs union between Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan comes into force despite Belarusian complaints about Russia's retaining duties on oil and gas exports to its neighbors. So apparently Belarus is not happy about this. October of 2010, President Medvedev, I have such a hard time with that name, sacks the powerful mayor of Moscow, Yuri Luskov, after weeks of criticism from the Kremlin. Mr. Luskov had been in the office since 1992. Wow. 2011, December. United Russia suffers drop in share of the vote at the parliamentary election, but keeps a simple majority in the State Duma. Tens of thousands turn out in opposition protests alleging fraud, and the first major anti-government protest since the 1990s. Alright, Putin's second presidency. I'm going to make this quick because I know we got a few minutes. Vladimir Putin, in March of 2012, Vladimir Putin wins presidential election. No, really? Opponents take to the streets of several major cities to protest at the conduct of the election. Police arrest hundreds. In July of 2012, law goes into forcing requiring non-governmental organizations receiving funds from abroad to be classified as foreign agents as part of wider crackdown on dissident. Okay, August of 2012, U.S., EU, and human rights group condemned jail sentence imposed on 3 members of punk. Okay, I'm gonna say it. Punk band Pussy Riot. Okay, that's what they're called. Over an anti-Putin
Interesting.
protest in Moscow Cathedral. The women were sentenced to 2 years for hooliganism.
Really?
Yeah. Russia formally joins the World Trade Organization after 18 years of negotiations. And that's in August of 2012. December. Angered by the U.S. bill blacklisting Russia official in connections with the death in custody of a lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, Moscow bans Americans from adopting Russian children and stop U.S.-funded non-governmental organizations from working in Russia. That I remember. Yeah, it was like back and forth, you know. Crackdown continues. July 2013. Anti-corruption bloggers and leading opposition activist Alexei Navalny is sentenced to 5 years in prison after being found guilty of embezzlement in a trial he rejected as politically motivated. Alright, let's see. How are we doing? Okay. Alright, so let's move to the Ukraine crisis. Between February and May of 2014, fighting from Ukraine, pro-Moscow President Viktor Yanukovych, Russian forces take over the Crimea, which then votes to join Russia in referendum. This sparks biggest East-West showdown since Cold War. The U.S. and its European allies criticizing Russia's further intervention in eastern Ukraine. Russia suspended from G8 group of industrialized nations. And I'm just going to choose one more here. And of course you have the Syrian intervention. There are several incidences like a shooting down of a Turkish plane on Syrian bombing missions. Okay, let's go to 2018. Okay. Diplomatic role was Britain over the poisoning of a former spy.
Yeah.
And his daughter, apparently she died as well,
Oh.
which Britain pins firmly on Russia. British allies joined London in imposing further sanctions on Russia, including the United States in August. Vladimir Putin inaugurated for 4th term, mind you, this is like 6 years now, as president after beating minor candidate in the March election. Finally, July 2018, President Putin and his U.S. counterparts Donald Trump play down reports of Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election at the summit meeting in Helsinki. And since we have no more time, we are done with Russia.
Okay.
I guess final words on my part. Russia's a very complicated nation with a long history in struggles and in expansionism. And while Putin is he's a bad guy in some ways, he's also a very strong man.
Mm-hmm.
And Russia is benefiting in some ways, you know. But if the United States doesn't stay on top of it, what do you expect, you know? Anything from you guys before we quit?
I don't think so, no.
You want to give your spiel again?
Sure, yeah. Go like us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Social Factor Podcast. You can find us here every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. We're doing world history this season, where every week we choose a country in the world, and we talk about the history of it. We do the research on that.
And it may or may not cross over a couple episodes.
Yeah.
Apparently.
if it's something that's a small country that'll take up a short time, we'll do multiple countries in one.
But
Anyway,
I really don't think that'll ever happen.
That's it for this
we
episode.
expected this to be a short episode, and here we are.